podcast. We got Deadforge back.
How's it going?
All
It's
right.
been a minute.
Yeah, it's been quite a while, and it's probably I know it's been over a year now. Definitely, it's been a few months since I've done a
Sounds about
podcast in
right.
general. I've just been so
Oh,
busy.
really?
Yep, very busy.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten pretty behind on my gaming bounty board podcast, but I do a weekly podcast, Quad Damage, with a couple other friends.
Do you post that on a different channel?
Yeah. So Quad Damage has its own channel. It's just under Quad Damage Podcast on YouTube. Um, and we have like a Twitter, uh, all that other stuff where you can follow.
Okay.
Um, It used to be on the channel. We all three posted it on all of our channels, and it was just such a kind of widespread amount of views between different sources that we decided we're finally just gonna make it one big thing. I can't remember. I kind of double checked, but we might be on Spotify, but I can't remember.
Okay.
Um,
So it's working pretty well on the other channel.
yeah. It's doing pretty good. I think we're a good bit over 1,000 subscribers on that one
Oh,
now.
nice, nice.
Yeah, we have a lot of indie game developers on. We talk to a lot of different YouTubers, people like G-Man, Under the Mayo, Trav Guy, um, so many people. It's hard to keep up with how many people we talk to. But a lot of YouTubers, a lot of game developers and stuff. We got people on all the time.
What was it called again? Quad.
Quad Damage,
Quad
yeah. So
damage.
I think on YouTube it's the Quad Damage podcast.
Okay, we'll find this real quick.
You can probably search it and then look under channels if you're on YouTube.
It's got a red icon with guns. Is that
Uh,
guns?
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know
We got
about
quite a few
it.
episodes. Yeah, we've been doing it for little over a year. And my friend Robert, he does the editing aspect of it because he has a business of like doing marketing, and it's a marketing agency kind of thing,
Hmm.
and he does a lot of that stuff anyway. So he basically took on Quad Damage as his own little thing, and he does all the editing, and he does some awesome overlay stuff for the podcast, stuff that like there's no way I have the time to ever do for like my other podcast. But
Yeah.
I'm hoping to kind of do a little bit of a uh, overhaul to the Gaming and Bounty Board podcast and give it a new intro logo and so on this year,
Hmm.
and get some stuff going on there because I haven't really released anything regarding that in a while. So since early last year, I guess.
Yeah, I caught up on a couple of your videos. You had the update for your channel, and also the
Yeah,
top
yeah.
five games of 2024, which that was
Hmm.
definitely very interesting seeing your picks.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're developing a game right now, trying to.
Yeah. I'm working on I haven't even touched it in like a couple months, but yeah, currently I'm just trying to throw together like 5 levels roughly of the game and kind of have a working enemies and things like that just to throw a project together. I might release it for like free or something, maybe for $1. It's not going to be anything great. And then the next project after that is going to be hopefully a step up where I can put more money into it and everything. But just to give a shout out, Sam Marshall, he runs DOS Man Games, and he does some other stuff in the gaming space as well. But he makes a lot of bite-sized boomer shooters, and they're all made on something called Easy FPS Editor, and that's what I'm working on developing my game on. I, he's awesome, and he gives me early access to all those games, so I review them for the channel. Stuff like Reaper, Reverend was published by him, developed by somebody else. But like DOS Man, the game, and then there's a bunch of others. There's one that recently came out called Satan, which I think the name is kind of bland, but it's actually a really cool like heavy metal boomer shooter kind of experience, which is pretty cool.
Hmm.
I got sick, so I didn't have my review out for that. I got a Halo 2 video that's been delayed because of that. I was sick for like over a week, So trying to get caught up on things. And I got a bunch of collaborations I'm trying to do with people. So
Are you able to tell me what the idea is for your game? Or you want to
I mean,
keep it?
it's just no. I mean, it's just I guess just a little bit to reveal. I guess the idea is kind of a zombie first person shooter kind of experience. Yeah, and that's kind of the base of the idea, really. There's nothing quite more grand to that. I have like a title, a kind of working title. It probably might be the final title, and then the next game will be like a sequel or something. But it's not going to be anything crazy. It's kind of a pretty easy engine to mess around with. It's kind of like it's kind of akin to like making a game of Minecraft in the way, like the way you build the maps and stuff. And it's kind of straightforward, but there's a few things you got to learn, like figuring out how to put sprites in there, the size of the sprites, as far as like sequencing things. A lot of it's pretty straight. There's a lot of stuff you can work with. I can't remember the guy who created it, but it's pretty straightforward. It's kind of like the old RPG Maker engine and stuff like that. It's pretty cool though. I mean, it's there's a surprising amount of games actually being developed on it, and it's pretty fun. So I mean, I'm hoping I can possibly release something this year once I kind of get rolling and get things back on schedule as far as videos and some other stuff. Hopefully, I can get some time back into developing that, and hopefully, I can show more, make a video kind of announcing it, get it out there. It might be free. It might be like I said, like $1 or something, and let people play it out. I might drop it on itch or something. That might be easier than Steam. So.
So do you have any kind of unique spin to that type of gameplay?
I mean, given the engine that it's on, I'm not really sure how much. I'm not sure the capabilities of how crazy I can get with it. Um, but I would say right now there's probably not too much of a spin on just being a zombie shooter in a sense. Other than I'm trying to go for kind of a cartoony, not so realistic vibe to it. I'm kind of going for bigger, like more open spaces, like almost like a Serious Sam kind of thing versus like a more tightly enclosed Doom like experience. So we'll see how it goes. Like I said, I'm just trying to, just trying to throw something together right now before I can start developing something broader, something bigger. The whole project is really just me learning how to even do anything. So
Gotcha, trying to
yeah,
develop your own flavor, basically. Yeah.
yeah, and every big game developer has always said, you got to make something. You know what I mean? You got to keep making things. There's developers out there before they ever made their big game. They made like 30 games
Right.
that were all kind of like okay. And I think that's kind of the approach I'm going for. Just make something. It might be absolutely terrible for all I know. Right? It could be awful, but it's something.
I would love to offer an idea to someone that's really good at developing video
Oh yeah,
games, and it would probably work better as a 2D. But I always had this
yeah, yeah,
idea where you start out as a morbidly obese man on a
mhm,
scooter, and you
yeah,
just as you progress through, maybe I always like to resort to a castle, just
yeah,
this
yeah,
guy's trying to get to the hot girl on top of the castle. But
yeah,
as he's making his way through the castle, he loses weight. Then he gets buff,
yeah, yeah.
and then when he rescues the
Okay,
girl, he's all
like a
fit and everything.
dynamic progression.
Yeah, yeah. And I figured that would
Yeah,
be
that'd be a pretty interesting kind of theme for something. That's definitely a twist. That's definitely something that would be like pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of ideas for like, dream games that I could possibly make or something. I used to have a folder somewhere that I had like a bunch of ideas I wrote down that date all the way back to like when I was in middle school. Um, but yeah, there's tons of ideas. I mean, probably like my dream game would be to make a 3D platformer because some people know, some people don't, that I have like a huge soft spot for 3D platformers. I've always been a huge 3D platformer fan. I mean, they're largely like super easy, chill games that are just kind of fun, and I always enjoy like 100%ing them. Um, and it's a genre that's not really been that popular for a very long time, and it's definitely seen a resurgence as has every other genre in the last like 10 years. Everything has made a return in some way or shape or form.
yeah. it's
And but that's probably my dream game would be a 3D platformer.
yeah, and it's a shame that we see such a lack of experimentation with new ideas because we just see usually something becomes successful, and for the next 10 years we just get rehash after rehash of that same idea, just with the different characters or
Yeah,
different
yeah.
themes,
So
whatever.
I mean, I see that as a common opinion
Mm-hmm.
among people in the gaming space. But I tend to disagree because I believe that is the case when it comes to AAA, like
Mm-hmm.
mainstream gaming, that the majority of people are paying attention to, the majority of people are seeing the stuff that you're seeing on TV, or for the more casual audience who isn't really branching out further than that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, when you get down to indie, when you get down to like the boomer shooter resurgence or 3D platformer resurgence, I mean, there's games like what's it called? It's called Corn Kids 64, and it's like a old Nintendo 64 style 3D platformer by a guy who makes a lot of bite-sized 3D platformers like Super Kiwi 64 and MacBat 64 and so on. And it's a pretty cool twist on the 3D platformer kind of game. And there's stuff like Before Your Eyes, which is like an adventure game that keeps going with a blink of your eye from your camera. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting and different types of games that are coming out
Oh yes.
all the time, like 24/7. But they don't always, reach the mainstream. They don't always catch everyone's eye.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was something that I tried to go for when I did that top 5 games of 2024. Is, I mean, most of those games on there are games that nobody. It's not that they were known, but they're like they're games that did something interesting
Mm-hmm.
that I think are really not going to be looked at as something that you know was that game breaking, like just groundbreaking as a game. But like Gory Cuddly Carnage, which I put as my game of the year, which originally that spot was Metro Awakening, like I said in the video, but Gory won out for many reasons. It was like, I mean, it's a challenging, fun 3D platformer ish hack and slash game that's like gory, it's funny, it's wacky, but it's kind of got like a heartfelt story to it, a good ending. It's colorful, it's crazy, it's wacky. It's like a very old school inspired game, and I know it didn't get that much attention. It's like an indie double A-ish game, um, but it's such a cool one. So I wanted to see, just get as much exposure on it as I could. I mean, I did like a full on review for the game. I put it on the top 5. I think it deserves a lot more attention, a lot more exposure. Um, I say the same thing for all those games on there. One was like a walking simulator with Nobody Wants to Die, a VR game. VR is like better than it ever has been right now, and it still has so far to go. And nobody's looking at VR. Like unless it's Half-Life Alyx, nobody's looking. But like, there's games like Metro Awakening, the Walking Dead Saints and Sinners 1 and 2. There's so many good games out there that like are on VR. And with the Oculus or the Meta Quest now being its own standalone system, I mean VR has never been more accessible in history. So
Mm.
I mean, if at any point you're interested, this is the time to jump in.
Yeah, Gory Cuddly Carnage is actually the game I wanted to talk to you about. I played the
Oh
demo
yeah,
a few months back and loved it. I played through it
yeah,
several times actually. And I actually had plans to buy it, and I was going to get the physical copy. But
yeah, yeah,
I just I just never did. I still plan to. But it's
yeah. I still
funny.
got to grab my physical copy for. I was going to get it for Switch actually.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
I think they have it for PS5.
yeah.
Um, but it was. I
I
remember
think
when
they
I
only
first
had
saw
a
the.
physical was only for PS5 and Switch. I think. I don't know if they had an Xbox one, but I played it on Xbox digitally. But I think the physical was only PS5 and Switch. I think
Oh, okay.
something weird like that. Yeah.
So does the gameplay advance even more that was shown in the demo, or did you play the demo?
I did not play the demo. I'm assuming you probably haven't seen my video on
I
Gory,
did.
but
I watched
oh,
it.
you did? Okay.
Yep.
Well, yeah. So no, I never did play the demo. I mean, I only found the game because I literally was going through the store on the Xbox Series X store, and I decided to buy Nobody Wants to Die. I was like, I've been eyeing this game for a while, and I was playing it, and it was. I don't know if you've seen that video, but if you haven't, definitely check it out.
Hmm.
That was a very personal, like deep dive video for me and just like my mental state at the time. And so right after, I was looking through the store again, and I found like in the new release section was Gory Kelly Carnage, and I had never heard of it, never seen a trailer, never saw the demo, didn't know it existed. It just dropped. It was only like $25 or something. It's not even 30. And I was like, yeah, sure. It looks kind of cool. I was deciding between that and another like walking sim adventure game. And I'm happy that I went with that. And yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the demo entails exactly, but I can say that there is a lot of challenges, a full-blown like hub with unlockables. There's collectibles in every level, a bunch of awesome boss fights. Every level is insanely unique. The movement is like if you took Sunset Overdrive and Devil May Cry and whatever other hack and slash game you really like and kind of mixed it together, and it's just a very, very unique thing. There's a lot of upgrades, costumes, tons of unlockables. I mean, it even kind of has like shooter elements with a thing that you unlock later in the game. um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool things like that. The story itself is pretty decent. There's like comic book cinematics. um, I highly recommend the game all the way around.
Yeah.
If you're even somewhat interested in it.
Oh yeah, I definitely plan on buying it eventually. The demo was very impressive. You could unlock the hammer type weapon,
Yep.
and you had to use it against the bubble shields.
Yes. 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 Yes.
And I also
Yeah,
really
when you kind
appreciate.
of do the slam and
Yeah,
you kind of like do like a yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I really appreciate the level design as well. Seems like a lot of games lately have been kind of lacking in that department, from what I've seen.
yeah, yeah,
Like, it's just I was playing a demo for what's it called, Blade Chimera, and I was intrigued by it because the developer was saying, hey, Metrovanias are usually people having to explore for around for a while before
yeah,
they really get into the core of the game, and but this time I'm just going to speed everything up where you don't have to look around as much. But so I tried it out,
yeah.
tried the demo out, and I was like, I mean, I really appreciate what he wanted, but the level design is
Yeah.
just rather typical. It's just I've
Okay.
seen this platforming before. It's not exactly doing anything new for
Yeah,
me. But
I gotcha.
yeah, but Gory
It has
Cuddly
really good
Carnage.
level design. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I definitely remember a lot of it, and I always appreciate that,
yeah,
like how much a level can impact me. Where
yeah,
I'm like, oh yeah, that's you got to do this, you got to jump down and go on the
yeah,
railing
yeah.
and on the
Hmm.
billboards, whatever. And then also the
Yeah,
way
there's
that
yeah they have wall running and all that kind
mhm.
of stuff too. Yeah,
So yeah, I definitely I can't wait to dive deeper into that eventually.
yeah, yeah. And like I said, the boss fights and stuff are all like really good. And actually, the final boss is good. It's like one of those things. When I say like a final boss is good, it should mean a lot because like most final bosses in video games these days freaking suck. They're either like stupid hard or like not stupid hard, but they're like stupid easy or they're like kind of like eh. What I mean? It's like I can't remember what I
Gimmicky.
just played. I played when I played Callisto Protocol and I played it on hard, relatively for the most part. It's a pretty challenging game, um, especially on hard. But then I get to the final boss, and it's like a lot of people complained about it because people complain about anything difficult. But it's like the boss isn't really difficult. It's just that like there's exploding enemies that crawl at you, and if they blow up on you, they'll kill you pretty quickly. So if you just use your like telekinesis ability and throw them at the boss and like make sure you keep your distance, the boss is extremely easy. And it was like extremely it's always disappointing when you play like a game that you really enjoy and then you hit the final boss and the final boss is like it didn't test anything that you learned the entire game. It just defeats the
Mm.
purpose of a final boss. You're like, oh yeah, I mean, okay, it was a boss, but it wasn't that much of a boss. It's not like a Metal Gear Solid 4 when you reach the end and fight Revolver Ocelot and like every stage of like the entire history of Metal Gear Solid, which was a great final
Mm.
boss fight in my opinion. It's not something like that. It's just like Okay, it's a thing that you're fighting, and I hate that. From Software always does pretty good with final bosses.
Yeah, the presentation for the final boss in Metal Gear Solid 4 was incredible. I even just go on YouTube and watch it because it's just
Yeah.
it's massively entertaining. The music that shifts around.
Oh, and Metal Gear Solid 4 was like the perfect end to that series.
Mm.
That's where it should have ended. Metal Gear Solid 5 should have never existed. Sorry for anybody who loves Metal Gear Solid 5, but I think the presentation of Metal Gear Solid 5 is great, and I think all of the like missions are great, but I think everything around that is terrible. I think the base building, the giant open world, both suck because that's not like what you want from Metal Gear Solid. It's the complete opposite of what you want. I don't need to go like prone, crawling around the desert, picking dudes up and letting them go into a parachute, fly up in the sky and get caught by shit to go build a base. I don't care about that. It's a cool like added thing, but it's obviously just a bunch of filler. I mean, Kojima didn't want to make that game. Okay. It was one of those like it was like Miyazaki making Dark Souls 3. Like he never wanted to do that. You know what I mean? Like he didn't want to make that game. I compare Metal Gear Solid 5 and Dark Souls 3 a lot. Neither of them should have existed, but they do, and you either love them or hate them. And
Yeah.
they're kind of just like fan service games. That somehow, while being fan service games, also kind of severely deviate from what you love about the games to a degree. Dark Souls 3 is like, in my opinion, a pretty good game, but it does also like it makes Dark Souls like way faster than it typically is because it tries to mimic Bloodborne, and it kind of takes away from it, and they completely lost out on like the kind of level design that Souls is known for. Which fine, it is what it is. But I mean, I'll tell you this. I mean, I kind of cried a little bit when I finished Dark Souls 3. Okay, because it was like that final boss, in my opinion, and that ending is a great send off to the entire series. We didn't get that with 2. Like 2 didn't have that. We didn't have a send off. So even if Dark Souls 3 isn't perfect and it's very heavily flawed, I think the ending and like all that is like perfect.
Mm.
Just the base game ending, I think, is perfect
Yeah, there's
to
not.
end Dark Souls.
I didn't find a whole lot of love in the level design in that game. I feel like
No.
that's the worst, but definitely one of the worst ones when it comes to level design. Because going through it, I don't feel encouraged to explore and fight items multiple times like I can in Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, and Elden Ring.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's really the only one I don't like exploring in because it's just I don't find any of it very interesting, and I'm more like, all right, let me just grab this and get out of here. I don't really care what's over there.
Yeah, yeah.
And there are
It
some
was a
good
very like
moments.
jumbled mess of a game. Like the design doesn't make sense. It's kind of the point though, because it's like the whole point of Dark Souls 3 is it's like, in my opinion, the whole point of Dark Souls 3 is that it's like every universe of the Soulsborne universe like coming into each other and like distorting. And that, I mean, that's what it was. I mean, it's the game that like basically said, yeah, Demon Souls is canon, Bloodborne is canon, without being able to be too direct. But it's like all of it was all one thing, and like you get bits and pieces of every game in that one game. Everything is like a fan service, an ode to this, an ode to that. Like that's kind of the point, but it did miss out on like level design because it's not interconnected. None of it makes sense. It's very disjointed. Like going from this level to this level just doesn't make sense. Like you're just teleporting, you know what I mean? Like it just doesn't add up, and you're like, that's just weird. At least Dark Souls 2 kind of had some cohesion, a little bit. Even if there's some stuff that's like, I don't know how that works, but okay.
Yeah, I was really hoping they would let up on a lot of portals. Elden Ring kind
Yeah.
of seemed like to double up on that a good bit because even with the
Yeah.
DLC,
Yeah.
I can't believe how just flat the entrance to the DLC was. Of course, it was great defeating Moog and going up to that pelvis and interacting with the
Yeah.
NPC there, but it's all
I haven't
this.
I haven't played the DLC at all.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to spoil it then.
No, no, you're fine. I don't care if you do. I mean, I'll play it eventually, more than likely. I just have to get back around to Elden Ring, like we were talking before. I've I've been on the final boss, and it's not because like the boss was just like the hardest thing on earth or something. It was just like I played it a couple times, I fought the boss, I failed, and then I ended up playing something else, and then it just started a cycle of me not going back to
Mm-hmm.
Elden Ring. And then at some point, I uninstalled it to install something because I have very limited internal storage, and I just didn't reinstall it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was a whole process, but eventually I get back to it. And I do want to play the DLC. I gonna be honest with you, I haven't actually heard very much about the DLC at all. I haven't heard positive or negative. Somehow it comes out and it's like I didn't hear anything hardly about it, even though, Elden Ring's still a pretty big buzzword.
Yeah, I mean the DLC is kind of is I hate to say a mixed bag. I mean a lot of it. I mean most of
Yeah.
it is outstanding, but the exploration is pretty bad compared to the base
Really?
game. It's just completely inferior because they it doesn't make sense. A lot of the pickups you can pick up smithing stones
Okay.
1 and 2 for some reason. I mean, what player is going to be in the DLC thinking, "Oh man, I really could use a smithing stone level one."
Yes. I mean, so are you able to go through the DLC like as a fresh character and it doesn't actually make a difference?
um,
Isn't that why?
well, we'll see what happens. Is that it's the level the basically the DLC is just scaled extremely high. It's the most
Oh,
we've
okay.
seen the stats escalated. So basically, what you're doing is with the Shadow Tree blessings is you're just getting your defense up and your attack power up, and that's
Okay.
all it is. It still works at a pretty even field. It's just more about just getting your power back up.
Okay. Okay.
And they
Gotcha.
don't really strip you down. It's just the bosses still have a set amount of health points. They don't go up
Yeah, yeah.
depending on what level you go in. It's just, for example, my character has I think a total of maybe 3,000 attack points if dual wielding, of course. It's so 1,500 apiece for each weapon,
Yeah, yeah.
and so that's pretty much where you want to be. I hate to say something inaccurate because I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe that's where my character was. So you can definitely still plan it mathematically if you want to. Let's just say, of course, with the whole fire giant, for example, has what 43,000 health points.
Yeah.
So let's just say, for example, you wanted to kill the boss, defeat the boss in 10 hits. All you gotta do is that's simple math. You just remove the zero. So you would
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
do 4,300 attack points at each time, which
Right,
is
right, right, right.
rather unreasonable. Let's see. If you want to get like, let's just say a more realistic number, if you want to get the fire giant in 30 hits, you just 43,000 divided by 30, and that's a total of 1,433.
Mhm.
Attack power at once. But then that's also a very unreasonable number to reach, so you have to divide that by two. So you want a more reasonable number is to get each weapon at 716.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's a more realistic goal when you're playing through Elden Ring without having to do a ton of exploration and pickups.
Right,
I mean,
right.
it still takes a little bit of work, but sorry, I totally went off field right there, but
No, you're good. You're good.
I just like talking about math and Elden Ring. It just gets me really excited.
No, you're good, man. I mean, that's something. It's something you have to like learn how to do when you're playing like a looter shooter type game, or you're
Mm-hmm.
playing something like a FromSoft game. It's one of those things that you gotta, I mean, I think a lot of times, especially in Elden Ring and like the Dark Souls games, you can actually kind of have no idea what you're doing for the majority of the time and
Mm-hmm.
still somehow beat the game. Um, which is, just a testament to like how they develop the games. As long as you're kind of good at like figuring things out, you can kind of just play any way you want and still beat the game. As long as you're like, kind of lightly figuring how things work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
I think that's what I liked a lot about Elden Ring was I think it's the best uh it's the best Dark Souls game, right? I think it's the best Dark Souls game. It's you can be super aggressive, you can be a lot more reserved, you can play very Dark Souls like or even Bloodborne like, depending on how you choose to
right.
go about it. But you also have the freedom to it's the best comparison, and this is funny because this is like I wrote down something a long time ago for a video several years ago, back after I played Elden Ring, that I was gonna make. May still happen one day, but there's something that Elden Ring does that all the other games doesn't, right? And that is all the other FromSoft games, aside from maybe Sekiro, kind of have a very truncated way that you're supposed to go. Very specific places you're supposed to go. And not a lot off the beaten path. There occasionally are locations that are off the beaten path. But it's usually relatively linear experience for the most part, other than Dark Souls 1 is a lot more Metroidvania, but there's a lot of areas that you can't really go to because you have to be a certain level to really be able to even survive. And they're only kind of around, one center location, mainly being the Firelink Shrine. So, what Elden Ring does is you start and you can go in several directions and still be and still be able to survive and do a bunch of things. You can completely get to the Erd tree without even going through one entire location in the middle that everybody is typically going to go. You can get there a complete opposite direction. But the comparison point that I had was Fallout New Vegas, where you start Fallout New Vegas. Every direction you go in is going to be relatively challenging. Of course, if you run into the Cazadors or you run into the Deathclaws first, well, that's a bit more difficult, but you could still get around them without having to deal with it for the most part. Or you can, just tough your way through and keep hitting your head against the wall and get through it eventually. I think Elden Ring is the same way, where you start the game and it's like the world is your oyster and you can kind of go in any direction you want and tackle the game at whatever pace you want.
Hmm.
And I think that level of freedom makes it so much easier for anybody to get into the game. It makes it easier to farm. It makes it easier to it makes it easier to get through the game without actually having to get good at the game to some degree, because you can easily farm yourself to be more powerful than the bosses. Uh, um, but it also allows for a huge amount of variety in the endings, all the different groups and NPCs and people. That's why I think Elden Ring was so if I get back in Elden Ring, I'm probably gonna be stuck in it for a while because every time I play a FromSoft game, it's just so engrossing and just you get lost in it and you don't want to leave it. And Elden Ring is one of those games, and I know there's people who disagree, but I mean Elden Ring is truly a phenomenal game as a whole, as a world, as an RPG experience, as a FromSoft game, Souls game. It's just so good. You know what I mean? The levels of freedom, exploration, adventure is unmatched in a lot of ways. It's
Yeah,
really good.
it's the best game I ever played, and I had a feeling that was going to happen when the game was coming out. I told my wife, I was like, I have
Yeah,
a feeling Elden Ring's probably going to be the best game I ever played, just judging from what I've seen and the
yeah,
the promises. And
yeah.
I think I almost have 2,000 hours in it. I don't think I've ever been so invested into a game like I have with Elden Ring.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's pretty impressive that you're still pretty regularly playing Elden Ring to this
Yeah,
day.
I mean,
Um,
I was going to take a break from it. I was going to force myself to stop playing because
right, right.
I was only playing it. And I wanted to take care of my backlog. So I thought to myself,
Yeah,
let me dig a hole underneath my house and put the game there and just bury it.
Barry Elden Ring done
Put it
this.
in a Ziploc bag. That way I have to work to get it back.
Yeah. There you
Like putting candy in a cabinet.
go. Yeah.
And over time maybe I'll just forget it exists.
Yeah,
Except for my YouTube channel that has mostly Elden Ring content.
right.
But then they announced Elden Ring Night Rain, and then I got
Yeah.
excited for Elden Ring again. Started playing it, and talking about
By the
fan
way,
service, huh?
all that uh the big Elden Ring multiplayer update when they finally opened the Coliseum. I haven't actually played since that even came out.
Oh wow.
How's all that stuff? Pretty good.
Well, I don't know. I don't PvP anymore.
Oh, okay. Well,
I
did
haven't.
you PvP at the Coliseum at all?
No, I did. I stopped PvP participating in PvP back in Dark Souls 3.
Oh, okay.
The only time
I
I
mean, it
actually
seemed
did
pretty
fight
cool because they had a dedicated place like Dark Souls 2 had.
hmm
Yeah.
I did fight a couple people helping out a friend of mine whenever they invaded.
Yeah.
I guess I'm still pretty effective. I did get them most of the time. But other than that, I
Yeah.
haven't really done any kind of serious one-on-one PvP stuff.
Yeah.
I
I
just
always enjoyed the PvP in Elden Ring, actually. I liked invading people and sometimes being invaded because I felt like the space was quite open and it added a different flair to things, especially since you could have so many more people running around with you at one time and everything. It was pretty cool.
I miss the fear of it. Whenever I was
Yeah,
helping a
yeah,
friend
yeah.
of mine and someone was invading, and I didn't know where they were. I kind of was kind of a
Oh yeah.
big flashback to when I was playing the games years back, and someone would invade. I
Mm,
was like, "Ooh, I miss this feeling. You don't
yeah.
know where this guy's at, and you're trying to figure out what he's got planned."
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Oh yeah.
yeah, that's. But you can't get invaded if you're playing by yourself. You have to play with other people.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
mean, I think they did it pretty well to that it's pretty accessible in that way, right? So I mean, you have to be playing multiplayer to be invaded because it's a kind of it's I don't know, it's not unfair, but in something like Elden Ring, I think it makes sense because of it's just like their most accessible game as a whole. So the
mhm.
fact that there are certain stipulations around what puts you in the pool for that to happen is pretty cool. So
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of different approaches whenever I start a game. Like, how quickly can I get over here to get that done? How quickly can I
yeah,
get this done? Like, getting the medallions. Of course, there's three ways into the Atlas Plateau. You can get the
hmm,
medallions. That's the easiest way to get there. All you gotta do is just go straight for that church of whatever, is where you can
yeah,
collect
yeah,
the wondrous physique flask. You can go
yeah,
behind the church, go to that portal, go across the bridge where Grail's at, and that leads to Fort. One of the I'm terrible with the names.
yeah,
I
yeah,
just know the locations, and I know Fort Height is one with a medallion. Then of course, Magmar Makar is the second one, and you got the Ride Lucarius way where you get
yeah.
abducted by the abductor, and it takes you to where you got to fight the abductor duo, and it just
Hmm.
takes you to the window of the Atlas Plateau. But lately, I've been doing these boss specific speed runs where the speed run ends the moment I kill the boss. And I did it with Margit. I was trying to do it with Elmer the Briar in the Shaded Castle, but it was taking 30 minutes. Each attempt was taking me 30 minutes, and I was trying my best not to
Oh,
get too obsessed with that because
yeah, yeah,
since it
yeah,
takes 30 minutes, I might need to do something at the house. Child, I
yeah,
need to
yeah.
attend to a child, and it's just that's why I can't do full speed runs of video games because there's just no way it's possible. And
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice.
I also never wanted to be. I never wanted to end up as the guy on the King of Kong's documentary where he's trying to beat Billy Mitchell, where
Oh, yeah,
his
yeah, yeah.
child needed changing. He's like, I can't. I'm in the middle of a run here, and his child's walking
Right,
around with
right.
a full diaper. I was like, oh, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm trying to avoid by just doing these small little speed runs, something I could still
Yeah.
achieve within reason. So the Elmer the Briar one I still haven't been able to do yet, but I did do the Margit specific speed run, and I was able to do that in under 6 minutes, 5 minutes and 28 seconds, for the in-game timer. And the samurai class was the best one to do because of the bleed. And
Right,
I
yeah.
also utilize parry as well, so I get riposte adds on to the bleed, and he dies so quick. It's incredible how quickly you can defeat Margit without leveling anything up.
Right.
You can do that with every. I mean, it's possible with every class, but you can kill him with just probably just a little over 30 seconds if his moveset's correct. You also got a lot of luck involved as well because yeah, you can know how to defeat Margit, but also you have to depend on what he's going to do at the very beginning of that fight. Is he going to do the aerial attack where you can get a couple of good hits in, and then is he going to do that
Yeah.
delayed attack where you can also get a lot
Oh,
of
yeah, yeah,
attacks
yeah.
in that's one of the best punish windows. And it's funny seeing whenever I'm helping people, they don't know that it's a distance based attack. You have to get close to them,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things I really appreciate about Elden Ring is how they do that distant based attacks, where you get rewarded when you actually approach the boss and understand where those
Yeah.
hitboxes are. And I hope we definitely get to see more of that in the future. Just
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I,
because
I I probably suck at Elden Ring now if I hop back in, but I was pretty good at it when I was actively playing it. But
mm-hmm,
I mean, I hopped on like maybe 30 minutes before I hopped on here with you. I hopped on Sekiro for a few minutes and was playing that Sekiro,
mm-hmm.
whatever. And man, I was getting my ass whooped by like one enemy for a little bit there. And then I started going doing some other stuff, and I was like, damn, I remember I like really like this game. I'm like maybe halfway through Sekiro. Like it's one of those games like I just kind of started playing other stuff, and I didn't come back to it. But it's a really good game as well. It's actually probably my favorite FromSoft game.
I definitely
Funny
consider
enough, though, even though I haven't beat the game, but still.
I definitely consider it the closest to perfection out of all the From Software games. I think Elden Ring has a lot of flaws, but it's still my favorite. It's just but it does have a
Yeah,
lot of flaws. But Sekiro is
yeah.
pretty good at doing what it's set out to do, and
I think it's because it's a lot more focused,
yeah,
it's
definitely.
less it's less dependent on like the player element. So it's like there is no I mean minus minor things. There's no real different way to play the game. You know what I mean? I mean how you approach certain scenarios can be different, whatever. But there's a very precise way to play Sekiro. It's you have to play a very aggressive, parry based gameplay. That is the way the game is played. You know what I mean? Like can't really play any other way. You have to do a lot of parrying. You have to be aggressive.
Hmm.
That's just and occasionally you have to mix it up because different enemies are different ways, whatever. But yeah,
I
it's a
think
lot
the
more focused.
right, yeah, and I think the level design is also consistently
Oh
really
yeah,
really good. I don't think there's
yeah,
really a stale moment. I have some problems with the boss fights, but it's really just nitpicky things.
yeah,
Yeah, a lot of them get a little too gimmicky for my taste, but it's
right.
once you get the flow of Sekiro, the deflection rhythm,
Oh yeah,
you can fly through that game. Multiple New
oh
Game
yeah.
Plus stacked on top of each other, deflecting, getting through Nitro, and then the final boss. It's just once you get in that, really, it's a drug. Just like all the other games, it just
Yeah.
becomes a huge drug. And finding that heartthrob moment where you defeat a boss and you
Oh
happen to
yeah.
do it without taking damage, and your heart's about to beat out your chest. It's isn't.
You know that that's the thing. Like, I was thinking, because they shadow dropped Ninja Gaiden 2 Black a couple days ago, and I started playing that, and my only experience with Ninja Gaiden was Ninja Gaiden Black on the original Xbox, and I never owned it, I never beat it, I just played it. I remember it being a really fun and relatively challenging experience, especially since I would have been like 5 or something when it came out, 5 or 6. So, and that's kind of was in my mind. So when I started the game, I was like, what difficulty should I play on? Should I play on normal? Because it's like known to be a pretty hard game. And they have like a new difficulty. I think it's like super duper easy mode. It looks like it's got like infinite revives or something, infinite something. I don't know. It's basically just like play the game for you mode. And that's great. Whoever wants that. But um I decided to play on hard, and I mean I'm about 4.5, 5 hours in, and the first 4 hours of the game I found to be relatively easy for the most part. Like if I wasn't paying attention, any of the enemies could kill me in like 2 seconds. But for the most part, I could get through any given scenario with no problem. Not using that many healing items. The only time was like, I mean, the first boss of the game I defeated no problem. Um, and then it went on, like the bosses got a little bit more challenging sometimes. So like it'd be like a sliver. I'd use all my healing items or whatever to defeat a boss, and it's like, okay, that's kind of what you want. And then eventually, I made it to a place earlier today actually, and I was fighting a bunch of these like werewolf enemies, and then there was like a bunch of other. There's like 10 different enemies on me at one time, and like I got out of there. I had no healing items, and I had like a sliver of health when I finished the fight, and it was like, okay, I guess it's time to start getting challenging here, and it's stayed relatively in that area. I mean, except like they have some weird, like they have a lot of bosses. It's like a game, like it's a lot of bosses. There's a boss like every other level. Um, but the last boss I fought, like you could just stand there and just shoot it with like your ranged weapon and just kill it, and you barely even get hit. So it's not even really a really challenging experience or anything. Um, but there's been several bosses that take me like 4 or 5 tries or more to beat, and that's what you want. But it was kind of like confusing me there for a minute because like, isn't this supposed to be a lot harder than it is? Maybe it's my experience with difficult games. I don't know, but I was watching somebody else play it, and they were playing on normal, and they absolutely got obliterated by like the first boss of the game. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't know. And maybe it's one of those things where it's like if you figure out how the game works, it becomes a lot easier than if you don't really know how the game works. So in that game, for instance, if you're not using your block button, you're going to be absolutely destroyed all the time because you have to block, and then when you're blocking, you can move in different directions to kind of do like a little dodge called it's called like Way of the Wind or something. And if you attack after perfectly blocking someone's attack, you can do a counter attack into a combo because basically the fighting works like a fighting game. Um, and so you do a lot of combos and like special abilities and stuff. And it's different than like a FromSoft game, but it's still like in that area of being challenging. Something like Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is a good comparison, which is a very challenging hack and slash game by Platinum. And that game has one of the hardest final bosses I've ever experienced in my life. More so, I think Senator Armstrong at the end of that game is more challenging than every single Dark Souls game final boss I've ever played in my life. But I think it was my fault though because like I played through that entire game and I think I played it on hard and like every single fight in that whole game was like a biting your teeth kind of moment. Like my teeth were getting smaller, it was just shredding down. I'm just like the whole game, like barely any health, every single situation. I never really perfected the combat. Like I never really paid attention and got good at it. So when I met the final boss, it was one of those moments where you actually do have to use every single thing you learned throughout the entire game to beat him. So the only way I was able to beat him is to finally learn how the game's combat works. And then I defeated him. And it was one of those like, holy shit, this was amazing. Thank God I finally beat the final boss. Like it was one of those experiences that will always stick with me as like such a great game because of how fun and challenging it was, much like, a Souls game or an Elden Ring or a Sekiro, Bloodborne, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And just something about those games that really test you. They're great worlds, they're great games, and if they were easy, they would still be fun, but because they're challenging, they're memorable, you know? And I know that's always like a big, dividing point among players and developers alike. Should there be accessibility? Should games be hard? Should they be easy? And so on and so forth.
Well, you look at Dark Souls and how much it has helped people with depression, and
Oh yeah,
would we have the same results if it had difficulty options that would make the enemies easier?
I don't think it would.
You don't think it would?
No, I don't think if it had difficulty options, it would help anybody with those issues because
Mm.
I think the game's dynamic difficulty is intertwined with its whole meaning that you can derive from it, which is to not become hollow,
Mm-hmm.
to become depressed, to not give up, type of thing. So by not giving up, in the sense of continuing to learn how the game functions, continuing to beat the bosses, beat the enemies, overcome the challenge, then yeah, that's helped people overcome a lot of different things. So if you had a difficulty slider or something and you could put it on easy and just breeze through the game, then it would be like playing Minecraft or playing a farming game or playing a walking simulator or a puzzle game or something. Like it would just be a casual experience. It wouldn't even be the same thing. Like yeah, you'd get to like experience the world and the the story or whatever, but you wouldn't experience what those games are all about
Right.
without the difficulty, in my opinion.
And we actually talked about this on the last podcast we had.
Yeah,
And
I figured we probably did.
yeah, so I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right about the organic difficulty and the adjustments you can make. And people, definitely anyone listening, look up videos for Dark Souls and depression. It's incredible the journeys people have been through, and usually it starts out with them saying, "Oh, Dark Souls was too tough. I put it down for a while, but at months later, I kept thinking about it, and I went back, and I ended up beating the part that I was struggling with the most, and
Yeah.
it elevated them and helped them get past the depression. And it's very inspiring. And it's amazing that
Mhm.
a game like Dark Souls can exist for that very reason. I mean, it's
Yeah.
probably I know Dark Souls. I'm pretty sure Dark Souls has saved quite a bit of lives just because of that alone. People, even people that haven't even told their stories on YouTube and
Yeah, yeah.
Reddit or wherever.
I mean, even if it's maybe it's not depression, maybe it's not a mental health thing,
Right.
maybe it's even just finding the motivation or
Mm-hmm.
helping them become consistent or um, it in being able to beat one of those games, any FromSoft game, you have to learn a level of discipline that
Mm-hmm.
could help you in every facet of life, just to be able to beat them. Because I mean, it's simple and easy to go, okay, this is challenging. I'm gonna go play something else. Okay, I'm gonna go play. No offense, but Gory Cuddly Carnage instead. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a lot more of a breeze in comparison.
Right.
Um, you know, I'm not
And
saying that game doesn't have its moments, but
right.
yeah, it's like that. It's easy to just put it down and go play another thing. And I mean, I guess in a sense, I kind of did that with stuff like Sekiro and stuff, and I just played other games. Not inherently because I gave up because it was difficult, but just because I play too many games. But
It's like I need a break from the difficulty myself, and I usually apply all that effort into the From Software games. So I've been trying my best whenever I play any other game not to take it easy. I
yeah,
do all kinds of weird challenges on Elden Ring. I'm always feel like I'm obligated to defeat bosses without taking damage, and I put all that work and mentality into doing that. So I play something like Evil West or Bridge of Spirits, Last Faith, Doom. I don't go all the way to the hardest difficulty. I've had problems with other games and hardest difficulties with bugs, especially when I play the game on the first week of release. The bugs are usually just they're so
yeah,
incredibly prevalent throughout on the hardest difficulty. Hogwarts Legacy, I've ran into a lot of stuff on this hardest
yeah.
difficulty, and
You know, uh, actually, I played Hogwarts Legacy on. I think I played it through the first time on hard. Um, Very fun game. But I was gonna say with Evil West, I'm assuming you're playing it on normal, right?
yes.
Okay. So I pretty much max upgraded everything in the entire game because I thoroughly explored everything
Mm-hmm.
and I played through on normal. And then I'm about 50% or more through the game. On my second playthrough was on hard, which I've been on for like a while now. I just haven't been back to it really. But every time I have been back to it, it's pissed me off every time and I quit because that game on hard, even on New Game Plus with every upgrade in the entire game, I'm sorry, but it's harder than a Dark Souls game. It's fucking hard. Like
Yeah, I'm
it,
sure.
the entirety of every single From Software game does not compare, and that's just because something like Evil West, in my like, the reason it's hard isn't because of a lack of like skill, because I got really good at the game, but it's more of something like that was not inherently designed with difficulty in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're ramping up difficulty, it's just for the sake of difficulty, right? It's not like it's Evil West isn't designed to be played on harder than normal. So when you're on harder than normal, just the enemies get a lot tougher. They do a lot more damage, and you just gotta. And it's so it's not really like it's not designed that way. It's just it's harder.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why something like that is significantly more difficult. But there's still people out there who torture themselves on
Yeah.
every imaginable
And,
difficulty for whatever fucking reason.
and I was in that realm as well, where I'm like, okay, well, I'm a From Software player that I had to play other games on the hardest
Yeah,
difficulty, and that was such a big
yeah,
mistake. I've discouraged myself from playing so many games just because of that mentality that I had, and I got to
yeah,
realize these games are not developed for that
yeah,
range.
yeah, yeah,
I got to get down to what do I find entertaining? What am I having? What am I enjoying? Of course, I'm enjoying the
yeah,
difficulty that's designed in From Software because that's in its DNA. That's how it's meant to be played. I can
yeah,
I can walk around with zero health and be fine with that in Elden Ring. I don't care because I want to learn how the boss fights work because they're mostly reasonable with their attacks. Well, I can get with you on the Elden Beast about that later, but
yeah,
it's so strange whenever you fight a boss in another video game. It's almost like you're just playing something artificial. It seems because the
yeah, yeah,
gameplay and the tracking it feels so off, and you're trying to you're trying to play it to how your skills had developed in the games like From Software. Okay, well if I run this way, the boss should be able to take off his tracking, but sometimes the tracking is almost 100% on the player. There's no way you can just outrun a lot of stuff, and that's how in Hogwarts Legacy, the only way I could avoid a lot of attacks, and I know this is just very intrusive on the game's design, but I wanted to defeat boss fights without rolling, without taking damage, and stuff like that. And I found it was really fun finding my own way to avoid rolling. In fact, for you have iframes
Yeah.
whenever you would pick up an item and throw it at an enemy, and so I
Yeah.
utilized that for, hey, if I use this, I don't have to roll out of attacks, and it proved to
Right.
be very effective. I have 3 boss fights on my channel where I actually do achieve this, but after that I couldn't do it anymore. It was not possible for me, at least. I couldn't find any other ways to do
Yeah.
it. But that stuff I did find very satisfying. I did do it in Resident Evil 4, the the remake of Resident Evil 4. Found ways to implement the challenges that I wanted. But even though I found gold in achieving those challenges, it's I had to endure a lot of BS. But
Yeah. After so much from software, sometimes you need a Stardew Valley or
yep.
something. And after so much leisure, you need something a little bit more challenging. Depending on your mental state, your feeling, the time of the year. Different games hit different at different times.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, some games are designed for difficulty, and other games are not. But I'm really happy that like FromSoft games exist, and now there's actually like a lot of games that are taken from the design. So I mean, you got the Souls Light kind of games that are like Clash Artifacts of Chaos, which is a really good game. Is a kind of Souls-ish, a little different, but kind of Souls-ish. Still relatively challenging. Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Fallen Order, significantly easier in majority of ways, but still a lot of that design in there. Um, and games like was it like games like Wolong Fallen Dynasty, Rise of the Ronin, Neo, uh, Black Myth Wukong. Not saying that a couple of those aren't really Souls likes, but they take from the book of old games. The book of games that are designed to be mastered. I mean, go back and play Shinobi and old Contra and shit. Go play Super Mario World, okay? Um, Go play any like really old game, NES game, or something like that. Even some early Xbox, PS2 games. Games just used to be made a little differently, and games used to have challenge difficulty as a pinnacle of its game design. 9 times out of 10, for the majority of games that existed, were more challenging compared to today. I mean, I think the original Splinter Cell or even the original Metal Gear Solid are not that easy of games. Like just the stealthing part, just all these different aspects are not easy. You know what I mean? That they're challenging. I couldn't tell you how many times I failed playing the original Splinter Cell just trying to do that damn split in the hallway and shit. Like it was just there's just not easy games.
uh, Spider-Man 2
Games are just
Enter.
made. Like,
Oh, sorry.
no, no, you continue.
Oh, yeah, Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro.
Mm.
PlayStation 1 era. When I
Yeah,
was a kid, there was this spot, and it's probably not even that difficult, but I just remember as a kid, it seemed impossible. I think it was because I just didn't know how to do a
yeah,
mechanic. But you had to stop an airplane from escaping. I believe you. I can't remember what was going on in context, but you had to spray your web at the propellers to get them to
yeah.
stop to get out of the garage. And when I was a kid, I was like, I have no idea what to do here. And I think it was just me back then, just being really dumb and not being able to figure it out, and not knowing the mechanics exactly,
Yeah,
or
maybe,
learning through
right?
the
It's
game.
like a lot of games have things you can do that you don't think you can do,
Mm,
or a lot of older games don't tell you how to do anything really. Like maybe they
right.
hint towards this is a doable thing. Maybe they even do tutorialize it, but it's not like as straightforward as something today.
Well, they
Um,
do. Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro has very good tutorials. They're also very
Right.
tough as well, but they definitely teach you how to do basically everything in the game. And I think when I was a
Yeah.
kid, I didn't do all the tutorials, and when it
Yeah.
came to doing that specific mechanic, I missed out on it because I didn't do the tutorial. Because I think I would have remembered that. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure.
I absolutely despise tutorials in games because well, not necessarily. So it is good tutorials I like. So like
Hmm.
a diegetic, normal feeling good tutorial that's like part of the story or it's like whatever. But I hate a game that has like a bunch of pop-ups that are just like very obvious shit. Or like I don't know, just very hey, you're an idiot. This is how you do this thing. Kind of, I just hate stuff like that so much. It was like when I was playing Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. Um, I've had experience with hack and slash games, so I know you can like jump back and forth between walls. I know you can wall run. I know you can like jump off things, jump on this and jump on that. And so I was able to do those things, even though like I was in parts of like I was in levels where that wasn't even implemented yet because that's when they were showing them to me. But they do, even though they do have a pop up thing that pops up on the screen, you have to interact with the body that gives you the whatever, like the item, kind of like a FromSoft game. And I kind of like how like FromSoft more so just gives you a little like text blurb that says, "Hey, this thing, whatever," and I mean, you could just figure it out on your own, or you could actually just read the little thing, and they're entirely optional. It's just
Yeah.
like an Elden Ring at the beginning. There's like an entirely optional tutorial path at the very beginning um, that most people probably missed,
Do you,
and I think that's fine because like it's relatively straightforward, but there are intricacies that could be taught.
yeah. Do you think From Software could be a lot better at teaching players how to parry? Because I feel like it's not exactly. It doesn't seem to be pushing players that much. What got me into pairing more was Sekiro, even though it seemed to be the most generous out of all the games, in my opinion. I feel
Yeah,
like Bloodborne
yeah.
had the most satisfying parries.
I think if Sekiro wasn't generous, then I don't think anybody would beat that game because
Right. Yeah.
like it is parrying the video game. Like, you know what I mean? Like that is the only way to play the game. You have to parry. You have to be relatively precise, but you don't have to be completely precise because they have a poise meter that fills up, and then you can do a finishing blow,
Mm.
etc. And of course, being aggressive makes that poise meter go up, and you have a poise meter, they have a poise meter, and so there's a whole strategy to that. Um, I think I would like to say, sure, like maybe they could be better at teaching people how to do that stuff, but at the same time, it's like you can play through those games. Like you can play through a Dark Souls game without ever learning how to parry. Ever. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like it's not like it's a required thing. So like they don't really tell you how to do a dexterity build or a strength build or a magic
Mm-hmm.
build. They don't tell you how to effectively use magic or what they don't really say like the best way to do a tank or the best way to do a quick character or they don't give you like direct of how to do all these other things. They don't tell you like they don't really even explain to you like, oh hey, this is gonna make you roll, this is gonna make you fat roll, or this is gonna make you medium roll, this is gonna make you fast roll. You just figure that out based on weight. Um, so no, I don't think they should have to um, explain it better how to parry because it's such a I mean, the first time you just hit the button by accident, you're like, "Oh, that's kind of a parry," and maybe you give it a shot. You're gonna die a lot trying to do it, but eventually you'll
Mm-hmm.
figure it out if that's something that you want to do. But I guess that's also like you know part of the freedom of those games is how you want to play. I've always been someone, which I think this is why I acclimated pretty quickly to something like Sekiro, is not necessarily the parrying aspect, but the aggressive aspect. So even in Dark Souls games, which are so much slower in comparison to Bloodborne or Sekiro, um, and almost kind of hurt you for being aggressive at times, I've always played like first time through a dexterity build. I've always played pretty loose. I've literally used the Uji Katana in every game. One, two, three, and Elden Ring was like my go-to for the longest time. I carried the Uji Katana through 90% of the game. Um,
Yeah, very effective in
and
Elden Ring.
It is, yeah. It's very effective in all of them, really. If you,
Mm.
especially if you keep upgrading it, it's like an extremely powerful weapon. Um, and it's always fun to get it too, because in most of the games you have to kill someone who has it. But that's how I've always played. So I always kind of played pretty aggressive. I always had a shield. I never two-handed. Like I would occasionally two-hands the Uji Katana, but it was mostly I had a shield in case I needed to block. But I always played fast and loose, and I was always light enough to like kind of roll around quickly. And that's just kind of how I always played. So that's why when I played Sekiro, I was like, yeah, I like this. It's quick, it's fast, and I'm gonna be like, it's kind of like Ninja Gaiden. Like early Sekiro, I, obviously, other than being destroyed in the like intro and stuff like that, early Sekiro was like I kind of was breezing through it in a way. Like I was kind of, this isn't that bad. Most of the enemies I killed pretty easily. Most of the early mini bosses and main bosses I absolutely destroyed. I mean, I killed Lady Butterfly first time. I killed what was his name? The dude on the horse. I forget his name.
Oh, Gonichiwa Aniwa.
Yeah, I killed him like second try. Um, and I was like, dang, okay, yeah, I'm whooping this game's ass. And then eventually I hit a point where like I absolutely got obliterated by something. Um,
With the bull.
but yeah, no, the bull did mess me up. And then the ogre like absolutely destroyed me because the ogre is a nice skill check because he is nothing like anything you fought up to him or even anything you'll fight for a little bit after him.
Mm.
He's just so unwieldy, hard to like see what's gonna happen. He's so quick for being so slow. Um, but he's a nice skill check. You get past him. I mean, that's what's actually good with Sekiro is like the mini bosses are skill checks. They're like, hey, are you learning? Are you figuring this out? Are
Mm-hmm.
you learning how the game's working? Because if you're not, it'll make sure that you do. You know, unless of course you choose to skip the mini boss by just running past them or whatever, because you can do that with like every single one of them. But then when you make it to like the big boss, then you're gonna get probably absolutely obliterated. So, but that's
Yeah,
on you. That's your choice.
yeah. I was stubborn. I played through Sekiro as if it was Dark Souls, and I actually did it quite successfully. It just took a very long time to kill the bosses because I was running and poking and running and poking, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I got by doing that because I didn't want to deflect. I was like, I refuse to deflect, and then I got to the final boss. I was like,
yeah.
oh, I gotta deflect.
Well, you did it that long?
Yeah, I made
Dang.
it all the way to the final. I even defeated the Demon of Hatred well, of course, he's more designed for you to be aggressive and not a whole lot of deflecting,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
but yeah, I made it to
Well, it's
Sword
kind
of
of funny,
Satan.
but like I kind of did that early on a little bit, but it's kind of funny because like when you do that, it's like you leave the fight with a lot less health, and it takes so much longer, right? But like if you when you do it right and like you get a good parry in and you just like beat the shit out of the boss,
Mm-hmm.
it goes by like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's so quick because it's meant for that aggressiveness, right? And it's actually kind of funny because I played Sekiro first and then I went and played. I haven't beat Bloodborne either, but I played Bloodborne after Sekiro. And here's a funny thing, right? I love the art style of Bloodborne. I love a lot of it, right? And have played like a handful of hours. I haven't really sat down and like I haven't got invested in Bloodborne. But I really don't like its gameplay that much. I like Dark Souls gameplay, Elden Ring gameplay, and Sekiro gameplay more. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of similar to like Sekiro in the sense that it's very aggressive for the most part, and you like parry with your gun and stuff. But I absolutely hate the way the gun parrying works and how it feels. And I just didn't. I don't know.
Which
I didn't
gun
really
did you
connect very
did you
well
choose?
with the. I didn't connect very well with the gun with the gameplay. The been a minute. I think it's like the like the medium kind of gun. I don't know. It's
Was
been
it
a
the
minute.
blunderbuss?
Possibly.
Okay, because in my opinion, that's the best one to use.
Yeah.
The pistol is the one you don't want to use because it's got a
Right.
slightly different time. There's one thing about parrying in the From Software
Maybe I
games.
don't know. Maybe I did. Maybe I did get the. Maybe it was the pistol that I had actually. Maybe it was the
Yes,
pistol.
I don't recommend the pistol for people that are
Yeah.
trying to get used to the parry system. Blunderbuss is what you want when it comes to timing attack,
Mhm.
and that's the thing about the parrying in all the games. You want to find your timing preference because
Right.
you have different tiers of you got your small, basically small, medium, and large. You don't
Yeah.
want to. It's not. If I wanted to encourage somebody to parry in these games, I don't recommend large. I don't recommend medium. You want to go with small, and like the buckler shield is the best thing to use in Elden Ring. It does technically have more frames to catch and attack, but it's definitely something, and it's different with each game. You want the medium tool in Bloodborne, which is the blunderbuss. The pistol is technically the small, but it doesn't work
Yeah.
as well with the timing preference. But also, it
It's a lot
just
more precise. I feel like you got to be a lot more
probably yeah,
precise with it or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
The
all about
timing's different for
yeah,
sure.
and you definitely want to I always recommend just going through all the different timings, tool timings
Yeah.
for parry, because everybody's timing preference is going to be different. I personally like to if parry whenever the attack is about to hit me. It makes the most sense animation wise. I don't like to parry before the boss even attacks. That doesn't make sense to me, so I'm not going to go for that.
Right.
And
Right.
so in Elden Ring, I like the parrying dagger. I find that the parrying dagger is the most consistent with what I prefer in the
Yeah.
timing wise. In Bloodborne, I've always just stuck with the blunderbuss.
I've always used a pretty like small to medium shield in
hmm
in Dark Souls and in Elden Ring. I couldn't tell you at all right now what I use in the game, but in Elden Ring, it's been so long since I played, but I know it's something small to medium.
Yeah, this
Um,
samurai starts out with a small shield, and that's actually what I used, of course, with
yeah,
the Margit speed run because it was convenient because I had the bleed from the katana. It was significantly more than the great knife, and then plus I had a small shield that I could also use for parrying. And going back to
yeah,
parrying real quick, uh, well, my theory is the reason why a lot of people don't go for parrying that heavily, and I can also relate it back to myself, is that there's a lot of risk into learning to parry. There's going to be
oh
a
yeah,
lot of time you got to spend. Okay, how many times? When's the proper time to do this? During the attack animation. And I get it.
yeah. And even when
That's extra
when you
time you
kind of
got to
learn
invest.
it, you'll get messed up.
Right, exactly. You get hit if you miss it, and you get killed probably. I mean, you will get killed several times, and then Elden Ring expands on that even more. There's a greater
Yeah,
risk because it's going to take more successful parries just to get a critical attack to happen.
yeah,
Margit teaches the player at the very beginning, hey, you got to parry more than once to get a critical strike, and then eventually you get to Margot where it takes three parries.
yeah,
And then of course with Melania, and then same thing with the last boss in the DLC. You got to get three parries in order to get the critical attack, and that's the hatred, the dislike towards the parrying system. Like I said, is expanded a lot more in Elden Ring because it requires more work, and that's kind of just
right.
my little theory about it because that's just how I felt about it in Dark Souls and all the other games. People are always telling me, hey, you need to learn how to parry. Is worth it. I was like, nah, I don't want to. I don't want to do all that. I don't like. I don't. It doesn't feel great to me. And then Sekiro proved me wrong on that.
Right.
and
And that's the funny part is like I never I always play aggressive, but I've never really been too big on parrying. Like I
mhm.
do it more so in like fodder enemies, but I never really parry much when it comes to bosses.
Well, the
I
boss
just
fight,
get good at dodging.
Margit, the fight flows significantly better if you parry him, and
Right.
Elmer the Briar flows very well. Radagon has a different. I don't really parry Radagon anymore. I'm more of focusing on stance break with him these days because I want to get his fight out of the way so I can fight the Elden Beast, which is the longer fight. Which it can be a
Yeah.
longer fight. It depends on how strong you are, but Margot, I kind of have a weird approach with him in parrying. When he does the spear throw, I perform a jump attack and then I whip out the parrying dagger and parry the one attack that follows up with that most of the time,
Yeah.
and then I just do that. I don't really do any. I don't parry right after that. I like building up
Right.
to it. So by the time I get the critical attack on him, that's where he's doing the spirit rain onto you, and that's where you can get a stance break on him most of the time.
Yeah.
And then that transitions over to his second phase where he has all that whatever the combustion liquid all over the place, and then he
Yeah,
starts
yeah.
applying blood to his weapon. But parrying has a very interesting effect to boss fights in the games. Margit, it has changed Margit for me. I hated Margit this time last year, and here fairly recently I've developed a very unique relationship with the fight because of how parrying works with the fight. Because when you deflect an attack with a lot of boss fights, in the especially with Margit, you land a successful parry, and pretty much 9 times out of 10, pretty much every time, you can follow up with another parry directly after. You just gotta understand the timing of the attack. Is he gonna swing slow
Right.
or fast, whatever,
Yeah.
and you can just melt through his second phase once you get yourself positioned just right in the second phase. Because sometimes he can attack with a spirit, which you obviously cannot parry. But the moment in the second phase he uses a regular attack that you can parry, the second phase is basically over because he will just you can just take advantage of him using basic follow up attacks.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
it's very fascinating how, like I said, how quickly you can kill Margaret just based on parrying alone.
Yeah. I mean, I know. Like, I remember. I think it was like Artorias of the Abyss in Dark Souls One. Um, is a very challenging fight if you don't know how to parry. But if you know how to parry, like you absolutely destroy him with parries.
Artorias?
Yeah, Artorias. Yeah,
You can parry Artorias?
pretty certain that you can parry him. Yeah.
I could have swore it was just Gwen you could parry. Let me fact check you real quick.
Yeah. 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 Go for it.
Uh, okay. Looks like you can, but you can't repost.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I'm seeing mixed things here, but
Oh, okay.
I'll look it up a little later because I don't want to
All right.
misspell what I'm
Anyway,
talking about.
I found it to be. I didn't even try to parry him or whatever, but
Okay.
it was a very, very, very challenging fight for me. Um, very good fight, but a hard fight. I got absolutely obliterated. I couldn't tell you how many times with that guy. But man, I love his armor. He's
Uh,
a cool character too.
a lot of people are hoping that he appears in Night Rain, but it's Prime Artorias.
Um, yeah, Night Rain seems interesting.
Yeah, of course, we already had confirmation that Nameless King is in there. Centipede Demon. Um, I think that's the only two I know of so far. Just going by off the trailer alone, I haven't looked up any additional new information if it has
Because
dropped.
it's multiplayer only, right?
No, you can do it. You can do it offline.
Oh, okay.
It
Hmm.
might not be recommended. I don't know. I don't. I have to see. I'm hoping that it's viable by yourself, just like the base game.
Yeah.
But I think it's mainly made for online play.
Yeah, it seems very multi. I mean, it seems like a very multiplayer focused
Mm.
experience.
And you got that whole
Uh,
barrier coming in that shrinks, and you get 15 minutes
yeah.
to prep your build, go around the world, collect whatever you need. So it gives you plenty of time to get yourself
It's
prepped.
Elden Ring Battle Royale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you read much
Yeah.
about it? That rain?
No, I saw the trailer and I read like one article on it, but I haven't looked into it a whole lot.
Yeah. It's going to be a totally separate attachment. It's not going to be part of the base
Yeah.
game. It's just going to be its own spin-off, sort of something like that. But it's going to be just really cool seeing all the past boss fights
Yeah.
with modern day upgrades to their design and possibly their peak design. They're probably going to add attacks. Like I can't imagine the Centipede Demon being exactly the same from Dark Souls. He's going to be sped up.
Right,
I'm sure
right.
he'll have additional attacks, and then we're also going to have the stance break system. I'm sure. Nameless King pretty much already has it, so that's going to be even enhanced even more.
Yeah.
And I, Demon Souls and Bloodborne, though, I don't really think we're going to see anything from them. I mean, maybe, but that's a Sony property, and Elden Ring
Yeah.
spans out across all the other consoles, and probably eventually Switch 2 has rumors about Elden Ring being playable on that. So
Be interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like an interesting experience. It seems like it plays a little differently than base Elden Ring.
yes, you have the vaulting kind of. I believe vaulting
Yeah.
was more enhanced in Sekiro than Demon Souls. I wanted to call out to Demon Souls, but I believe is actually more compared to Sekiro when it comes to vaulting over walls. But you can also do. It might actually be in a way similar to God of War 3, where you get what is it, Hermes
Yeah,
winged feet, where
yeah,
you can go up. It had to be very specific spots, I think, where you can climb up the
yeah,
walls. I think it looks like that to me.
yeah. It looked kind of almost contextual at times.
Yeah. Then you got
Yeah, it looks interesting. I'm definitely intrigued by it for sure.
you got the spectral wings too, where you have spectral geysers, whatever, like the
Oh,
spectral
yeah.
jumps with torrent. You have those in the air with the spectral wings, and it gives you a boost. I don't know how much access you have to them once you're in the world. At first I thought maybe that they just drop you into the world that way with the spectral wings,
Yeah,
but it's possible just to explore around. You have to use them as well because the level design is probably gonna be all kinds of cut up and a lot of
yeah.
death drops possibly. So I had to use
Oh,
spectral
yeah.
wings
I'm
just to get to
curious.
different areas.
It's supposed to release this year, right?
Yep, 2025, and yeah, it's probably gonna be my number one game because of course it's Elden Ring. Just like how Shadow
I
of the Earth Tree
wonder.
was my favorite game last year. And
Right.
technically it's this, it's a DLC, of course, and a lot of people don't consider it its own game. But I just it's I don't know. I'm gonna end up putting more hours in it
I
than any
mean,
other game that year.
it did get a nomination for Game of the Year. So.
Yeah, and as a whole other can of worms with what qualifies.
Yeah, yeah.
I went ahead and typed in my top 5 games. I didn't do anything on YouTube for it, but of course, like I said, Shadow of the Earth Tree was what I liked the most. And then Astrobot, Stellar Blade, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Pacific Drive. Even though I only played 30 minutes of it.
Hey, I mean, it's definitely it's a unique list. I mean, it's cool. I mean,
I wish I had more indie games on there, but unfortunately, I
yeah,
want physical copies of indie games. I would love to see Plucky Squire on there, but I'm not. Physical
yeah,
copy doesn't come out till February next month. That's when I'm receiving it, so I can finally play it and
yeah.
maybe
The one downside is a lot of indie games don't do physical at all.
yeah. I finally
Which
got
sucks.
where is it? The Last Faith. I got that a few months ago because it finally was released on
Yeah,
physical, and that
nice.
was released in 2023. That game's pretty fun.
Yeah,
I need to get back on it so I can finish it. But
yeah.
I ended up falling into the whole self-imposed challenges on there as well. So I kind of burnt myself out of it. I need to jump back on and just forget about the self-imposed challenges so I can finish it.
Yeah. I might actually. I was trying to think. I was thinking about once I beat Ninja Gaiden, I might check out Wolong Fallen Dynasty. It looks pretty good.
Hold on, that was 2023.
Yes. Team Ninja.
Okay, there's the from the same
Guys
people that.
behind Ninja Gaiden as well as Neo.
Okay, yeah, I heard.
And they also made Rise of the Ronin too.
Okay, yeah, that came out last year. Rise of the Ronin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard the boss fights were fine in Wolong, but the level design wasn't that great, from what I've heard.
Really? Hmm.
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
Is there any games specifically? Is there any games for this year that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to playing The Outer Worlds 2. I'm looking forward to Avowed quite a bit. Um, I'm anticipating the Dying Light the Beast that's coming out. Really excited for, was it Revenge of the Savage Planet? It looks really good. I love the first game. And I'm trying to think of something I'm missing here. Um, well, actually, now I think Ninja Gaiden 4 looks pretty great. Since they announced that as well. That game looks pretty good. It's Koei Tecmo, who's behind Ninja Gaiden alongside Team Ninja, are teaming up with Platinum to make Ninja Gaiden 4. So that looks really good. Um, something else, I feel like. Something I'm missing. What is it? I don't know. South of Midnight looks fun. I mean, there's a few other games here and there. There's always, I'm always interested in so many different games. There's always so many games that come out every year. It's hard to keep up with everything that comes
Oh
out.
yeah, and hard to find the time to play all those games.
Oh yeah,
I have
no doubt about that.
I definitely want to look into that Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater release. I believe it's
Oh yeah, yeah,
upgraded
yeah. I
from
forgot that's coming out
the
this
old
year.
game. Death Stranding
Yeah,
2,
I
Mafia
am. Yeah, yeah.
Control.
No, the new Metal Gear Solid. That's a remake of Metal Gear Solid 3.
Okay, that's what I thought, but someone said I was wrong. But so I'm
No,
just
no, no, it's Metal Gear Solid Delta or whatever I think's what they're calling it, but
okay.
it's Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater remake is what it is.
On that thought though, remake when it's used in marketing,
Yeah.
um, is it reasonable to be confused because you have two different types of remake in marketing? How are you supposed to know what type of game? What does that represent when
Yeah.
the game is
So
called remake?
I think it's confusing now more than ever because there's so many remakes and remasters and stuff more than there ever has been because like all these old IPs are like finally either
Hmm.
being bought by company and being brought back, which I'm all for, by the way. I know a lot of people hate it. Oh, how dare you remake or blah blah blah. Like I don't give a shit. I want other people to be able to experience these games in the modern time. Not everybody's going to go back and buy a PS1 just to play a game.
Hmm.
Okay. So let's go for instance, uh let's go like for instance Shadow Man remastered. That game is a remaster because it's just like they took the best version of the game. They took a lot of the added stuff that was in the Nintendo 64 version and they upped the visuals. They made it run at 4K 60, but it's largely the same game, so I would consider that a remaster. Um, any game that's like um basically the same game but with like some added cut content or added content or whatever that just like ups the resolution and cleans up the textures a little bit and adds some lighting improvements. That's a remaster, right? 100% that's a remaster, Putting Art Resident Evil 4 on everything in existence, that is a port. You know what I mean? And, they put Stubbs the Zombie on PS4 and Xbox One and Switch, I think. Those are just ports. Like it runs a little bit better and it looks slightly better just because it's on newer tech, but it's just a port. Um, you know, Gears of War Ultimate Edition, that's a remaster because it's the same game, just slightly looks better. Um, but something like Resident Evil 4 Remake is not a remake, it's a reimagining because it is not the exact game. It is not just an updated game visually. It is an entirely different game with a completely different level design and but it takes a lot of the original game and builds it from the ground up. Resident Evil 2 Remake is a reimagining, not a remake, because it is not even remotely the same game, other than certain elements, but it's from the ground up an entirely different game. I mean, level for level, it doesn't even look the same. It doesn't even, the layout's not the same. Um, in the original Resident Evil 2, Mr. X didn't follow you everywhere either. That was a nemesis thing from Resident Evil 3. So it's an entirely reimagined game that stays mostly true, but it's not the same. It's like Doom 2016. That's a reboot. You know what I mean? It's still technically Doom. It's not a remake. It's a reboot of the series, which technically is also a sequel. So
So
yeah, it gets a little confusing, right? Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. That's some horse shit. That made it very difficult for people to know what the fuck that is. It is not a remaster. I want to tell you, it is not a remaster. Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster is not a remaster. It is a remake because it is entirely the same game on a brand new engine built from the ground up with added content, original content, quality of life changes, and some entirely game changing elements like checkpoints that completely change how Dead Rising can be played. You can turn those off, thankfully, but yeah, there's so many quality of life improvements in Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster that the game is actually made even easier. And if you already know how to play the game, it's extremely easy. But it's a relatively difficult game for most people out there. Um, and then, for instance, Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. The original Ninja Gaiden Black was a remake technically, of the original Ninja Gaiden that looked a little bit better, added more stuff, and was a definitive version of the game. Ninja Gaiden 2 Black is on an entirely different engine. It is a remake of a 2008 game in Unreal Engine 5 that, oddly enough, takes elements of the original game and elements of the remastered Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2 version of the game that was released on PS3 and combines them to make this supposedly definitive version of the game, which is very divisive among fans as of late. But I would consider a remake, not a remaster, because it is like from the ground up, faithfully the same game, but more than just a HD texture pack. You know what I mean? Like it's like a entirely new assets. Like it was built from the ground up to be very much faithful, much like Destroy Humans 1 and 2 remakes. They're built from the ground up with quality of life improvements, etc. New engine, new graphics, and so on. Those are remakes. Remasters are just touch-ups, maybe with added things on new consoles. Remakes are like ground-up overhauls. Ports are just ports, right? And then reimaginings are like remakes of the game that are also pretty much entirely different games. So yeah, it's extremely confusing, but like that's how I would define it.
So, what would you consider? What would you call the thing? The movie, The Thing.
Yeah,
What would you consider that?
that new game.
No, sorry, it's a movie.
Huh?
1982.
But yeah, no, I mean, there's a movie, and then they made a game of that movie.
Correct. Yeah, starring Kurt Russell. What would you consider The Thing in terms of that realm of definitions?
The original movie.
Yeah, yeah, The Thing. Do you think it's a remake or just original?
Um, was there a thing before the thing?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. I guess it would. I don't think I watched the thing that came out before that one. Um, but I would say that it's. How similar are they?
It conceptually pretty similar, but they do reimagine a lot of things. But it's
Right.
also very
Okay,
well known
so
as being a remake.
right. Okay.
Do you
So
think look, before you add on, do you think
yeah,
that remake can be an umbrella term?
for
Several things, reboot, reimagining.
no, I don't think it can be an umbrella term. I think it has to be a very defined term. I think all of them have to be pretty defined. I don't think any of them can be umbrella. I don't think remake can be umbrella term because and it's used as one. But for that instance of like Resident Evil 2 and 4 remakes, they're not even remotely faithful like at all. I mean, other than certain boss fights and characters, etc. But they're not really faithful to the overall game design as a whole. So they're not,
So
remaking the same game.
so let's say you mess up. I'm just throwing several things at you. I just wanted to see where you stand.
Yeah, well, okay. Before you say it, but with the thing, for instance,
Mhm.
I would say it's just like a reimagining of that original concept, if not potentially even a reboot or whatever, because it's very much similar, but it's also like almost entirely like John Carpenter's vision of it, I guess. So it's while sharing the same concept, I would say it's a reimagining because it's
Okay.
similar but not the same.
So do you think a movie remake doesn't
But
exist?
no, a movie remake. I think a movie remake does exist.
Do you have any examples?
I guess in the sense. Let me just think real quick. Man, what is a let's see a movie remake? Honestly, I can't think of anything. I don't know. No, not really. I can't think of anything. I mean, how about I say no? Reimagining is the only thing that there is. Remake does not exist when it comes to movies because none of them are that case. Because there's not a single remade movie that is like word for word the same thing. It is not word for word the same. It's not structured the same. It's not directed the same. There's not a single movie in existence that is exactly the same as the movie that came before, and all they did was make it look better.
Well, try to make it
Or
look better.
right, try and make it look better. Yeah, sometimes it's
Because,
an absolute dog shit in comparison.
well,
But yeah, no, I think when it comes to movies, it's yeah, no, it's I don't think it's the case. Because when they do a remake, it's never the same. It's not even remotely the same. Like it's okay, maybe the main plot point is pretty close to the same thing, but it's like not the same. You know, trying to think of an example of anything. It's hard to think because
well, the closest thing movie-wise I can think
let's
of is
say
Psycho.
okay, yeah, yeah. I was gonna
But,
say fucking what was it called?
but
Point Break was the one I was gonna say.
the Psycho, attempt,
Yeah,
it was a shot for shot, but the
right.
performances were drastically worse than the original,
Yeah,
and that was basically the biggest problem.
yeah,
Therefore, it does, you can fit it under the bill of reimagining because the performances are different. Therefore, you're not going to get the same,
right.
experience from the first film.
But I would say that at least it was probably one of the only things in history, just about it in cinema, that probably attempted to be an actual remake, truly shot for shot,
Now,
but failed.
do you think a actual remake of a movie, if it could exist, do you think it would be successful?
If they did somehow shot for shot do it, and the performances were somehow on par or maybe even better,
Well,
if that was
if it's slightly
if it
different
was
though,
achievable, if it was shot by shot and it was achievable, and they did do it, it could be successful, but it probably wouldn't be because people would be like, "Why is it just the same movie, but not the same
well,
movie?"
let's take Jaws for example.
Yeah.
They use practical effects all the way through, and
Yep.
more than likely, they're not going to do that these days. They're not going to use a
No.
mechanical shark,
CGI. It's gonna be
CGI.
dog shit.
Yeah, exactly. So movie remakes, reimaginings, whatever, if it stays shot for shot, script by script,
Yep.
it's not going to be
Yeah.
successful. When you see a new release of a film, you want
Exactly.
to see something different. You want to see the story
Exactly.
altered in a different way. And so
Which you think
possibly it
that
could,
it's not a thing. Yeah.
yeah. So, but with video games, whenever they are
Yeah.
approached that way, marketed that way, they are more
It's a lot easier
successful.
to do it as a video game.
Like with Crash Bandicoot.
Yeah.
Crash Bandicoot was marketed
Well.
as a fully remastered
Yep.
game, but later on, you had games like Medieval where it was originally marketed as remastered, but then they switched to remake, and
Wait.
I don't
And
know the
that's
sell
just
that
they
one.
don't know. They don't know their own terms is the issue there. Um, Crash Bandicoot, I would call a remake, or yeah, a remake because it is the same game in a new engine with new graphics and different quality of life improvements, etc., all in one big bundle. It's not identical. Like it's identical because it's faithful from the ground up, but it was remade in a different engine, so therefore it is a remake. It's not a reimagining because it is the same game. It is the same game except for visuals are better. Some of the gameplay is even better. Not a big Crash fan, but the same goes for Spyro Reignited Trilogy. It is literally the same game with quality of life improvements, and in fact, the remake almost teeters visually into a reimagining territory because they're able to put so much more detail into the environments where they're actually putting things there that were more left to the imagination in the really terrible polygonal graphics of the PS1 for especially early Spyro where there was less detail. So I would still consider it a remake because it is faithfully the same game, same characters, same plot, same everything from beginning to end of all three games, except the visuals are much improved in a new engine with quality of life improvements.
What do you think about?
Destroy Humans 1 and 2 are like that, are perfect examples of being a remake. Where Destroy Humans 1 is a remake with quality of life improvements because they actually added gameplay elements from Destroy Humans 2 into the first game, which does change it and deviate it from being exact copy, but it's still the same game with quality of life improvements, better graphics, new engine,
What do you think about the term fully remastered?
fully remastered. I don't know what the fuck that's supposed to mean. Like, What's a partial remaster? A port.
Hmm.
So now it's supported with upscaling. So that makes it a partial remaster because it can be upscaled. Because anything put on a modern console gets auto HDR. Any port gets auto HDR, and it gets upscaled to whatever. If I play Stubbs the Zombie on my Series X, the port version of the game supports an upscaled version of 4K HDR, and the frame rate might improve just because it's on more tech. It's still just a port. It's the same damn game. It only runs because it's on better tech. It only runs better because it's on better tech. It only looks better because it's being upscaled to not look choppy automatically by the technology that's running on. But it's the same game. They didn't do anything to improve it. So that's a port, which you could call in theory, you could call a partial remaster. And then when you say a full remaster, I mean, it's just a remaster. I mean, it's just saying, hey, I took Darksiders 1 and 2 from Xbox 360 and PS3 and put it on PS4 and Xbox One. Which they just did again, by the way. They just remastered them again and released them on Series X and PS5. Which the only difference in Darksiders 1 and 2 on Series X PS5 is that they now run at 4K. That's it. Oh, and up to 120 FPS, because on Xbox One and PS4 they ran 1080p 60, or PS4 and Xbox One they ran 1080p 60, 360 and PS3 they ran like 720 to 1080i, like 30 FPS. So those are just remasters. Technically, I would almost say that the version being released on Series X PS5 is just a updated port, because it's the same game. It's the same remastered version that was on Xbox One and PS4. The only difference now is it's 4K. So it's still technically a remaster, but it's less of a leap, I guess.
So it can remake can only be used as a verb.
Yeah.
Okay. If you actually do Google remake, there's actually a
Yeah.
verb and a noun.
Really?
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting.
And if you Google the remake, what is the definition they're giving you?
To make again, to make anew, something like that, around that realm.
I mean, right, the actual definition of the word itself. Yeah, I mean, so, but that's the other thing about the English language. It's very contextual. You can take the literal definition, but when you take it into context, it can mean something entirely different. And that's the sad part, because it makes things extremely confusing. Because in theory, based on the actual definition of remaster and the actual definition of remake, you can go and say every remaster is in fact a remake. And every remake is in fact a remaster. They're almost one and the same. But there has to be, a difference for it to make any sense in marketing, or make any sense to anybody to be able to differentiate between a remaster and remake, which right now is being used very interchangeably. Whether we go for the literal definition or not, I mean, there's companies out there calling a port a remaster. There's people out there calling a remake a remaster and a remaster a remake. They're just not the same damn thing. That's why I have to come down and be like, okay, well, remake is taking something from the ground up, trying to be faithful, but it's in a completely different engine with potentially improvements and added content. And a remaster is just taking the same game and making it run at a higher frame rate and higher resolution with potentially quality of life improvements. Those are not guaranteed. A port is just taking the same game and now it runs on something else, but it doesn't change its performance or quality outside of whatever the system itself does automatically. So no, that doesn't fit the literal definition, but it's kind of the only thing that makes any logical sense.
So the problem I initially wanted to
Oh,
bring up
hold on.
was
Oh, it's kind of... All right, can you say something?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Like it's only coming out of my left ear. Whatever. Won't work. All right. Anyway, back to it.
So I just want to, I just want to throw this one at you because I'm just very curious on your thoughts on this as well. And this isn't. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
got you.
Yeah.
I
So
wasn't coming to for a second there. Yeah.
let's just say you're making something. You're preparing food for scrambled eggs, for example. You make the scrambled eggs and whatever you season them with, and you give them to whoever wanted some scrambled eggs. And the person you gave the scrambled eggs to say, I don't like the way you prepared these. And
Yeah.
so, what do you say in response to that?
What? Such a random question. Is it
I
something
know, I know.
unrelated?
I just want to see where you come from on this.
Oh, okay, okay.
So,
So if
if
you're
you
saying
messed
that
up
I
these eggs,
prepared something like scrambled eggs for someone and they didn't like the way it was prepared because they prefer something else,
mm,
what would my response be to that?
correct. What would you say? Like, okay, you messed up the eggs. You got to make them better. So, what do you say?
Hmm. I guess I would say, um, what is it you would like done differently?
Mm. And
You
so,
know, yeah,
and so you basically, when you go back, you make them again, right?
correct.
And you improve them
Potentially, yeah.
potentially. Yeah. So hopefully you do
This is
improve them. So I mean, you when you say that's remaking the eggs,
yeah,
it wouldn't
that
be
would be in theory remaking the eggs, yes.
okay. And you are making
Then,
them differently, right? So they're more appealing to who wanted the scrambled eggs, or at least attempting to make them appealing to the person that wanted the eggs.
yes,
Okay.
in that scenario, yes.
So in that context, reimagining wouldn't fit that.
No, I don't think so.
Because you don't say, I'm going to go reimagine the eggs.
I mean, you technically are doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But no, you would be remaking the eggs or cooking the eggs again. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you would be
But you're not
doing
making
that.
them exactly the same. You have to change
No,
whatever you did that was wrong.
yeah,
Let's just say
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
maybe you left. It doesn't even have to be with seasoning. Maybe you left them on the oven too long and they burnt. Like
right,
okay,
right.
well, I gotta take them off the eye a little bit sooner.
It's actually kind of funny because I work in a Waffle House, so it's kind of funny.
You work at a Waffle House,
Yeah,
but yeah, I just wanted to see where you stood on that one. Just
yeah, yeah.
um,
Hey, it's an intricate conversation about a very funny way of, you know, describing things based on literal definitions that can't even describe the things in which they're supposed to describe.
mm-hmm.
And that's just a problem with video games in general. That's not even starting with movies and so on. Like that's just video games, man. Like you can't even define what a first person shooter is. So let's not even start there. Okay, because the spectrum in which first person shooter, there's no one thing. Okay, you got boomer shooters, movement shooters, arena shooters. I mean, Serious Sam is not the same as Quake. Doom isn't even remotely the same as Bulletstorm. You can take Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, and then take freaking the finals. It's not the same game. Battlefield, Arma, they're none of them are the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they all come from a very similar place, but they're not the same. So it's like an umbrella term, but I don't think remake is an umbrella term for those kind of things. So it's all contextual, right? But
Gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if I was talking like, I mean, I usually refer to like Resident Evil 2 as a remake,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a reimagining of the game. It's you get very, very technical about it, then it could still technically be a remake, just not a faithful remake, right? So I guess it could be, if you want to define it even further and cut it in half, then you could have remake and faithful remake, right? So you just throw reimagining out the door and you just have remake and faithful remake, because technically reimagining and remake can be the same thing. They're words that mean very similar things, almost identical, but it's just how you refer to it. So I mean, you could say Resident Evil 2 is a remake, not a faithful remake. It's semi-faithful, but not fully faithful. Just
He froze up on me. Oh no, he froze up on me. I had more questions. There you are.
that's funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. You froze for me too, but yeah, I can still
Oh.
hear you the whole time.
What were you saying? You were talking
I
about.
just said, yeah, yeah. I mean, basically, Detroit Humans 1 is a faithful remake that modified it with some quality of life improvements.
So, when I first brought it up, the problem that I have personally is whenever something's coming out and is claiming to be a remake, I don't know what it's going to be exactly. Let's just say Resident Evil 4 came out, it was advertised as a remake.
Right.
I don't know if that's going to be just like the original, or is it going to be a reimagining?
Right. Well,
Silent
in
Hill
that case,
2.
it's like it's very similar, right? Like it's like Resident Evil 4, which I still need to play that. Oh, man, I still need to
It's
play.
actually very
But
different. There's only a couple spots
right,
that are very similar to the original game, but mostly
right.
it's very different.
Yeah, there's a few parts that are like similar, but it's mostly a completely different game. It's the same with Resident Evil 2. I mean, I played classic Resident Evil 2 and I played the Resident Evil 2 remake,
Hmm.
and it is very similar in a lot of ways, but it is entirely a different game
Were you
fundamentally.
expecting when they announced the Resident Evil 2 remake? Were you expecting it to be an upgraded graphically of the original game?
I don't even know if they were calling it a remake when they first launched it or not. But when they announced it, I was expecting something that was faithful, I guess, more faithful, I guess. I don't think I ever beat the original Resident Evil 2. I'm not even a mega fan of it or anything, but yeah, I mean, I guess I was when they said it. I mean, I don't even know if they said remake, but I know they definitely didn't say remaster. Um, so if they would have said remaster, then I was like, oh yeah, it's just basically it would just be Resident Evil 2, but like I can now play it on my Xbox. With now it runs at 1080 or something, but with the Resident Evil 2 remake, I was like, okay, yeah. So I mean, it might be, I was thinking, okay, it'll be faithful, but obviously they're redoing all the graphics, and it's like, obviously there's gonna be new assets, everything's gonna be different for the most part, like as far as graphically and technologically. Uh, yeah, I mean, but I've been used to remasters for years of so many different games, so it's remasters and ports have been a common thing for a long time. Remakes were not that common. A lot of them were, more like reboots back in the day than anything. Ninja Gaiden's a good example. Like the classic trilogy was on NES, was a 2D side scroller. When they made Ninja Gaiden in 2004, they called that a reboot because it was fundamentally not even really the same thing. It's actually a continuation of the series, not even the same character, and it's technically a spinoff of Dead or Alive. But it was the same name, but a completely different kind of game. So it's a reboot. It's much like the 2010 Splatterhouse game. That's just it's a reboot of the original series because it's technically still connected, but it's an entirely different genre of game.
Is
Not even
that
remotely the same.
so? Reboot and reimagining, that's not the same to you?
I think they're pretty similar.
Okay.
Um,
When a series comes
it just
back,
it's
is
but it's the difference of like I mean I guess it's kind of a similar concept, but yeah, I mean reboot and reimagining are kind of I don't know. I guess
it's
in a way they're
yes.
interchangeable, but they're very, very, very similar. Um, but I guess there's a few things that make it slightly different. So it's like, for instance, Doom 2016 is just called Doom,
Hmm.
therefore it makes it a reboot, right? but technically it's a reboot of the series, but it's also a sequel to the series because they would later confirm that it's actually a sequel to like Doom 64.
Do you think that's
Like,
the
so
right
it
way to market
continues.
it?
Probably not. It's
Do you
pretty
think
confusing.
reboot is a key word that gets people excited to want to jump back on? I mean,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
would you
I think
say
so because they're like, because I think they're expecting something like of a similar ilk, but different. They're also expecting something different. I think reboot is probably a pretty good buzzword that makes people want to tune in.
say I've
But I
always
think
known
also in this day and age, it's like a pretty mixed term as well.
I've always um, seen whenever a TV show comes back. For example, I think the first time I ever saw it might have been Beavis and Butthead when they first came back in
Yeah,
2013, I think, or 2012 when they came back. They were calling it a revival.
yeah.
So
And then
it wasn't a they weren't
recently they came back again and
yeah
they called it a reboot.
yeah isn't that weird?
Yeah,
So
it's happened more than once, but it's the same thing. It's not
mhm.
even. It's just it should just be billed as a continuation. It's not even. It isn't even a re. So it's the same thing. It's not even a reboot.
See, it used to be they're back. Oh, your
Yeah,
crazy characters, they're back. That used to be the big, and
yeah.
they still use that sometimes. But now, sometimes you'll see revival and then reboot, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of.
Futurama was like, hey, there's just more Futurama coming.
hmm So it's really
So,
it's just really fun seeing the marketing techniques that they use with
yeah.
products. And even when it comes to sounds, I find that very interesting. Manufactured sounds, the way a vacuum sounds, the way a car door
Oh,
sounds
yeah.
when it shuts, all that is manufactured. It's not.
Some pretty um, good examples of like remasters and stuff is Dark Souls remaster, right?
Mhm.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, that is the definition of remaster. It's the same game, but just made better graphically. And technically, it runs at a higher frame rate, so it's a better game. It's remastered,
Mhm.
right? Um, but it's still the same engine and everything, so it's just remastered. Now then you have Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin Edition. Now that's a whole ballgame. Like, what do you call that exactly?
Remix,
Because it's not. Yeah, it has to be a remix, right? Because
because
it's still Dark
that's
Souls 2 fundamentally, but adds a whole other possible like ending, final boss, and changes the entirety of all the spawns in the game. Um, changes a lot actually, entire areas of the game, but also is graphically improved more significantly than something like the Dark Souls remaster.
would that fall under reimagining too? Remix.
Maybe, maybe like it would be pretty damn close because it's like it's still basically the same game,
You know,
and but it's still fairly different because it's almost not the same game, even though it is the same game.
it's
I mean, the
funny how
bosses are the same, but it's like it's all placed different. It's weird.
they bank off the RE a lot. Look at Spyro, which one? Reignited. They use
Yeah,
Spyro
well, they're finding a
Reignited
lot of
Edition.
new ways to to say
Yeah,
remaster,
the magic of marketing. So SpongeBob, the Battle of Bikini Bottom, is called SpongeBob
rehydrated,
Rehydrated. Yes,
yeah,
yes, and
remastered edition for Red Faction Gorilla,
yeah. So they,
Darksiders War Mastered edition, Darksiders 2 Death Initive
mm-hmm,
edition. It's
definitive.
also
Yeah,
funny that one says War Mastered, which is it's another thing. Is there's definitive edition and remastered. Both are the same term basically. Um, it's just one is claiming to be the definitive version of the game, but every time that it's used with a game is used for a remaster.
what about Mafia?
That's a remake
Yeah,
because it's a ground up remake. But they say definitive edition. Is it? Yeah, I think so. It is the definitive edition of the game,
mm,
but it is a remake. Versus like the Mafia 2 and Mafia 3 that they released in the big Mafia collection would be billed as, I don't know if they'd quite reach remaster, maybe just ports. I'm not sure how much work was put into Mafia 2. Mafia 3 is just a port, but Mafia 2 might be a remaster. But Mafia 1 is definitely a remake. That's what I'm saying is like definitive is used. They use it for both remasters and remakes, and it doesn't really mean anything
Yeah, it's
because
just
it's like
more of a. It's just a. You know, it's just another marketing thing. You know, it's just
that's
people.
what Ninja Gaiden is. I mean,
Yeah.
black is their definition, their version of a definitive version.
Hmm.
But I guess it sometimes isn't always the case.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
quite
it's a
interesting.
marketing thing.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting subject because you want to find consistency, but it's not there, and that's what frustrates me the most about looking into this is that
Yeah,
it's just not. No one's using them. You know, the way con- I've grown up seeing them consistently. Like, you know, what would you consider 2005's release of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? What kind of release do you think that is?
I mean, every version of that movie, even the new one, Wonka, right? They would want you to say, so they're all remakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess they are all remakes. They're just not faithful, right? If we get down to brass tacks here, they're
Charlie.
not. They're not. None of them are the same. Like not even remotely. The closest is the original and the first, reimagining, reboot, remake version is the closest, to being to the original. Whereas Wonka is like an origin story. It's a prequel more than anything. It wouldn't. It's not even a remake. It's just a prequel.
Right.
But it's a prequel film.
Prequel for the Willy well, for not for the book but for Willy Wonka and Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's just the whole thing, But also, it's like something like that. That's a prequel. Still completely deviates from either of the other two films in what it contains. So it's none of them really, uh, coincide with each other at all. None of them are the same. None of them gel. And of course, you take book to movie, and that's an adaptation, which is another, it's a reimagining of someone else's work, which is what an adaptation is.
Mm.
And there's a whole other can of worms to open on, like, adaptations of things, books, movies, games, whatever, when brought to other things. So,
So, would you
yeah,
consider
it's
Charlie
a
and the Chocolate
complex
Factory from
thought process.
2005? Oh, sorry.
I said it's a complicated thought process. It's like
Yeah,
just
that's one of
determining
my
what.
favorite topics to talk about. I've talked to so many people about this because it's so much fun for me. But Charlie
Yeah,
and
I mean,
Chocolate.
I would consider that movie. I consider it a reimagining of the original because that's what it's
Of the
attempting
film,
to do.
the reimagining of Willy Wonka and Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, yeah, the film. Yeah,
So, what is exact? What is it exactly reimagining? You know, what is it borrowing from the original film?
I mean, the Chocolate Factory, I guess.
Well, that's from the book.
Um, right, right, but it's reimagining. It's reimagining that movie. I mean, I could almost guarantee that director was reimagining that movie. Was it Tim Burton who did that one?
Yep.
Right. Yeah, I could guarantee he was not trying to directly do the book.
Yeah, it's
Um,
really hard to to adapt the book directly when you have an existing movie,
yeah,
and I'm sure Tim Burton used some notes possibly, but the Charlie Chocolate Factory kind of in a way is more close to the book, especially with the Veruca Salt being the
the 2005 movie.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
because Veruca Salt, her the way she's you know eliminated is directly
yeah.
from the book, not the Willy Wonka movie.
Mm.
The Willy Wonka movie is the Golden Goose part, is part with
Right,
Veruca
right, right.
Salt.
So, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, as somebody who is not that interested in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, who's never read the book and has seen each of the movies maybe a couple times
Mm-hmm.
and really take it or leave it. Um, to me, it always seemed like the newer movie was trying to reimagine the original movie. Um, But I'm sure with closer inspection, it was probably more like Tim Burton took inspiration from the original movie while trying to adapt the book. It was probably a mixture of the two things,
Yep. Yeah, of course.
more than likely, which is usually how inspiration works. Because a lot of times you're inspired by things without even knowing that you're inspired.
Hmm.
A pretty good comparison point for a movie that I actually really like, a great film, is Guillermo del Toro's Nightmare Alley. Great, great film, which is adapted from a short story. I believe it was a short story. And there was a movie, a black and white movie, many years ago that was made of that short story, in which is similar, but they're both fairly different movies, even though they share certain scenes that are pretty close together, just because both of them were trying really hard to adapt the book or the short story. Um, but Guillermo del Toro has been, I'm sure he had seen it um, before, as he had interest in the short story, but he said that he did not try to copy, take inspiration, or use anything from that original film when making his film. And largely his film is vastly different in for the majority of it. But it has certain scenes that are very similar just because of that, being an adaptation of something else.
Mm. Well,
But
have you seen the
yeah,
Wonka movie?
the new one, yeah.
Did you know that's actually a prequel and a reimagining?
A prequel and a reimagining because it's technically a prequel to what we see in the movies, but
No,
and possibly also the books, but it's a reimagining of every bit of the source material.
it's a reimagining of a totally different story.
Oh, interesting.
Have you ever seen Fantastic Mr. Fox?
Yes, yes.
You don't see any similarities?
Well, I guess as you say it, yeah, I guess so. So it's a reimagining that, but with a
But with
Willy
it makes
Wonka
sense, doesn't it?
paint.
Because who are the two books, Fantastic Mr. Fox and Charlie and Chocolate Factory? Who wrote those two books?
I don't actually know. I don't know.
Ronald Dow. He wrote both books.
Okay.
So
Okay, I mean, I guess it makes sense too.
yeah, so it was. I was watching the movie in the theater, and I looked at my wife. And I'm like, I already seen this movie. I know how this movie's going to end because you got three corporate big heads
Yeah,
that are they're high strung and they want to take
yeah,
down the guy that's trying to build himself up, wants to be successful. Then they shoot him down a really like for example, Fantastic Mr. Fox. He's doing well underneath the ground. Oh, there's a little side hint with the underground tunnel system. Same thing with Fantastic Mr.
right,
Fox. Same thing
right.
with Wonka. They're in the
Yeah,
sewers and it's watch Wonka again. Watch Mr. Fantastic
yeah,
Mr. Fox and then watch Wonka directly after, and you'll be surprised how many things they borrow from the story. But it's almost
yeah.
exactly the exact same thing.
It's really interesting. Yeah,
But I just wanted to throw that in there because I feel like I'm the only person that knows about it.
right. Yeah,
I looked
yeah.
it up on the
I mean,
internet
yeah.
and
I
there's
never would
nothing.
have.
Yeah.
I never would have thought about that. Yeah, because I've only seen Fantastic Mr. Fox like one time. But yeah, I never would have thought about that.
Oh boy, yeah, we talked about that one for a
Interesting
while.
comparison point. Then.
Yeah, my wife gets very irritated with me because I try to get these conversations started with her. She's like, no, I'm not gonna talk about shepherd's pie for 30 minutes. Do you know about shepherd's pie, by the way?
No, what about it?
Well, how's it made?
Oh, how is it made? Oh god, I don't know.
Well, what kind of meat do you use for shepherd's pie?
I don't even know if I've ever had a shepherd's pie in my entire life.
Oh,
To be
really?
entirely honest. Yeah, I don't think so.
What? So you don't know what meat is used in it?
I don't. No, I don't. I don't think
Oh,
so.
okay. Well, there has been a misleading information about shepherd's pie in America. In
Uh,
America, shepherd's pie,
that's not surprising.
yes, with a lot of things. Shepherd's pie is made with beef in America.
Okay,
But what is
I probably would have been my first guess.
but what does shepherd mean?
So is it okay? So in I don't know where it comes from, but so would it be lamb?
Yeah, shepherd is someone that herds lamb.
Yeah. So it's made out of lamb originally.
Yes, shepherd pie is made out of lamb. Do you know what the correct term is for when it's made with beef?
No.
Cottage pie.
Cottage pie?
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's a great icebreaker. Whenever I, is
Yeah, I bet.
these kind of topics have helped me significantly, and where I'm usually very quiet. I just bring up
Yeah, yeah.
stuff like this, and all of a sudden I'm talking to someone for an hour. It's amazing, especially the cake
Right, right.
question. I love the cake question. That's my cousin loves that one. That one's his favorite because I don't know how much longer you got, but we don't have to spend too much time on it. But what would you consider?
Oh, you're good.
What would you consider? When does a cake become a piece of cake?
When does a cake become a piece of cake?
Yeah,
I guess once it rises.
once it rises.
Hmm.
So you make a whole cake, and then it's just a piece of cake. Is that what you're talking about?
Are you talking about an individual piece? Like you cut it off of it?
Correct. You cut a piece of cake out. You have a piece of cake,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
So what's the rest of the
So you're talking
cake?
about specifically a singular piece of a whole cake.
Yeah. You just cut a slice of cake out, piece of cake. But what do
Uh-huh.
you call the rest of the cake?
Just cake.
Just cake. Is it?
Just cake.
Well,
I mean,
it
it
wouldn't
could
be
technically also be a piece of cake.
correct. A piece of a pre-existing cake, right?
You know?
So let's just
Once
say
you take
for
a piece out, they both become a piece.
yep. But socially, it wouldn't be accepted as a piece of cake, right?
Right, technically,
You
yeah. I
can't
mean,
just
you're not
walk
going to
up,
see anybody else taking the rest of the cake and
right? You
cutting up
can't.
with it.
No one's gonna. You're not gonna win any arguments where you say, "Hey, it's technically." Say they said I could get a piece of cake. This is a piece of cake, right?
Yeah,
It's just the
I got
rest.
the whole cake
The
after
pre-existing
someone took
cake
the first piece.
doesn't exist anymore. You're not gonna win the argument socially. Someone's gonna kick you out of their
Yeah,
party.
yeah, yeah,
What about when you order a pizza,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
but it comes pre-sliced? Oh
Mm.
heck! I just woke up my son. Oh, no, he fell out of bed. I know he was getting close to the edge. I could see it, but he must have got further off than because I was so focused on what we were talking about earlier. Um, but so when you order a pizza and you know it's pre-sliced,
Yeah.
should you say I'm going to go order a pizza or I'm going to go order slices of pizza?
I mean, most people are going to say that they're going to go order a pizza,
Right. I have another.
but technically you're buying slices of pizza
Right. Yeah.
if
Exactly.
they pre-slice.
If they do, and
And also, if you did buy a pizza that was not pre-sliced and then you cut it down the middle, you would have two slices.
mm-hmm. Yep. There you go. Yeah, because you can just fold it and turn it into a calzone technically.
Exactly.
Is
Fold
yes.
it up.
Um, what if a restaurant, for example, they have a mold that's in the shape of a cake, but they
They what
advertise
now?
it. They have a cooking pan that's in the shape of a wedge, like a piece of cake.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Let's say they make the cake that way, but they advertise it as a piece of cake. Is that false advertisement?
Yeah, technically, because it was a whole cake.
Yeah, I don't know any restaurants that do that. That's just
They were
something
cut.
but yeah, that's basically a speed run of what
Yeah,
of the cake question. It's really fun with a group of people.
right.
You'll be surprised how much it just gets passed
Oh, I
around and
bet.
people try to debate about a piece of cake. It's really funny.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I think we've been
It's always
talking.
fun when you get down to specifics.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, we talking for a little bit.
yeah. But if you want to go ahead and I'll go ahead and end it here. It's past
Yeah,
midnight. If you don't mind sticking around for a little bit longer, just talk about stuff
yeah.
offline. That'd be great. But I'll go ahead and end it here. I thank you everybody for jumping on and listening to us talk for 2 hours. And have a great day.
See you later.